We are now recording, and welcome to this fourth forum in this series of looking at COVID-19 and the impact on congregational life. Let me share my screen and do a really brief introduction to kind of set the table for all of you. If at any point my sound cuts out or something else horrible happens, Karen, I trust that you will jump in and let me know. So let me start with just for those of you that haven't checked the UUA site lately, here's the position of the UUA as recently as the end of January and early February. From Susan Frederick Gray, the UUA continues to carefully monitor developments with testing and vaccinations. Last May, we recommended congregations plan for virtual operations until at least May of 2021. By now, we recognize this timeline will likely be longer. As the Biden administration develops a coordinated federal response, we expect it will be March before we have a reasonable sense of the vaccine horizon and timeline for when we might reach herd immunity. Well, it's almost the end of March, and I don't think that we have a really good sense of where we are, despite the efforts of the Biden administration to get vaccines into people's arms at a much, much greater rate. But I think there's still a lot of question marks. Here's the UUA document on gathering in person when COVID-19 subsides. This was updated on February 8th, 2021. And I just pulled out one excerpt from it. If you're interested, go to the website and read the whole thing. But our recommendations for congregations, it's the UUA now, are more stringent than schools and businesses that surround us, which are beginning to open up for the following reasons. As a community that values inclusion and collective care, we don't want to create in-person situations that inadvertently exclude those at higher risk or create situations that force those at higher risk to publicly identify themselves. Our decision-making must center the needs of the most vulnerable. The membership of most UU congregations is an older, more vulnerable population than the general public. We do not want congregational staff and ministers to be put at risk on the job, and a normally operating congregation presents too many opportunities to spread a highly contagious respiratory virus like COVID-19, and particularly with these variants that are starting to take on, I'm afraid, greater prominence in terms of how they may impact on us. Despite the number of people that are becoming vaccinated. Many people, I think, last year were fearful that when the pandemic ended, that there would be less people coming back to our congregations. And indeed, many people may decide to continue to participate virtually. But I came across a study, a very recent study that kind of belayed this, and I just wanted to share this with you. This is a study, the Protestant churchgoers' views on participation during COVID-19. This was a survey of 1,000 American Protestant churchgoers, and it was from February 5th to the 18th, so it's very recent. And it was done by Lifeway Research, which I've actually referred to many times in the past in terms of the research that they've done on the habits of churchgoers. And here's what they found in this study. 91% of those surveyed plan to return to attending worship post-pandemic, with 25% or 23% of that group saying that they will attend more often. 6% said they would attend less often than before, while 2% plan to really attend and 1% will stop attending altogether. And then the second finding, which I thought was really interesting, was that the demographic of churchgoers between the ages of 18 and 29 were the demographic most likely to report planning to attend more. Our younger churchgoers, with 45% of those people, 43% of those people saying that they will go to worship more than before once the pandemic ends. So that's just at least one study that provides some hope for us that people will come back and they'll come back strong. But of course, what the UUA is now calling multi-tiered approach, multi-level approach, what some of us refer to as the hybrid approach, both virtual and in person, is taking on greater attention. And we think that that will be the way in which our congregations will move forward once we begin to return to somewhat close to the way things were before. One more thing that I want to share with you. My minister, Reverend Peter Friedrichs, who is on the call today, sent me a document that was the blog of a congregational consultant whose name is Laura Stevens Reed. And I will be sending a whole bunch of links to you by email in the next couple of days. And this will be one of them. But I excerpted some of the questions that she thinks we need to consider as we prepare to start coming home once again. What are the values that define us and that we must stay true to as we make decisions? How have our priorities permanently changed in the past 12 months? What has our pastor, our minister taken on during the pandemic that needs to shift back to lay leadership? And how do we aid that smooth transition? What are we hearing from the larger community about its hopes and needs at this stage in the pandemic? And how might we contribute in ways that align with our values and gifts? And what support does our minister need to be healthy and effective? Because this pandemic has taken its toll, certainly on all of us, but particularly on our ministers and our congregational staff. Those are just some of the questions that she addresses in this resource. And again, I'll send that to you along with a whole bunch of other resources that I've collected and that folks in the previous forum have sent me. And so I want to encourage all of you who may have some links, some resources, put them on the chat. Karen will be monitoring it. We'll capture those and we'll send those out as well subsequent to this second forum. So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to ask a series of 3 questions, 2 of which you will discuss in a breakout room. Here's the first one. How is your congregation coping during the pandemic? What is going well? And where are you hurting? That'll be the first breakout room. You'll have about 10 to 15 minutes to discuss. Then we'll come back and ask each group to kind of report out, summarize what the group discussed. The second question is, what are your plans for reopening? And do you have a timeline? That'll be the second breakout room. And then after that, we'll finish by talking as a large group and asking the musical question, what has your congregation learned from this whole pandemic experience? And what have you learned personally? And there'll also be an opportunity for you to share any other comments or questions that you might have. So if a few of you could write down the first 2 questions, questions 1 and 2, so that if enough of you do that, then when you go into your breakout room, at least one of you will know the questions, because I'm going to take this off the screen in just a moment.
Mark,
Yes, Karen?
I put those in the chat, so if somebody wants to copy and paste. And also, right at 2 o'clock when we were about to start, thank you, Peter, for letting us know that Susan Frederick Gray put out a new message right at 2. So I put a little bit of that in the chat as well. It's not dissimilar to what you put in your PowerPoint. It's very similar.
Great. Okay. And this came from the UUA? Did you say, Karen?
Yes, it's the second that I've seen from Susan Frederick Gray, and it's about it says time to prepare, which is what we're doing right now. So that's good.
Great. You know, and I talked to Susan just a half an hour ago, and I asked her to please hold off on it until the forum was over. And she said, I'm sorry, Mark, I've got to get this out. So I'm going to put you in the first breakout room. There'll be 3 breakout rooms. So there'll be, maybe 4 or 5 of you in there. I would encourage you first to just quickly introduce yourselves. And then please assign or someone volunteer to be the facilitator / note taker, and to be the person who, when we come back, will kind of quickly summarize the sentiments of the group for all of us. I will keep your eye on the time as well. Peter, you'll have probably up to 15 minutes, no less than 10, no more than 15. So also keep your eye on the old clock on the wall. I will let you know, I will give you a 60-second notice before we come back together. Okay, hi, Lori. So I'm gonna put you in breakout rooms now. Let's see, we'll do 3 rooms, right, Karen? Okay, great. So here come the rooms. So just click on your room and enjoy your conversation, and we'll see you in about 15 minutes. It's a lovely picture, Karen. I'm talking to Karen Cowden. I don't know if she's there or not. Karen, are you there?
She may have stepped away from her screen and doesn't see the invite.
Yeah, there we go.
There she goes. Okay, so I just want to start out. Oh wait, we're still recording, aren't we? Well, I'm going to say it anyway. I have.
Wait.
Okay.
Hold on a second. Thank you for reminding me. Let's see. I'm gonna. Great. Welcome back, everybody. So what we want to do is ask a representative from each group, and hopefully you selected that person against their will, to just give a really quick kind of summary about the summary of the conversation, kind of maybe if there's a consensus and in terms of how the congregations are doing, what's going well, what's hurting. Let's start with breakout room 1. And if you didn't note which room you're in, that would be the one that Adrian was in. Karen Hyams, thank you.
Hi. So just running down real quick, some very common themes were pastoral care and the caring teams coming together and really, pulling their weight this year, and adding new jobs to their list. A lot of returning members, especially older congregants, and new people. And I was going to say, I didn't get to talk, but we had our new visitors are skewing much younger than they used to. Yeah, the people were having problems with the youth, like the young kids programs. RE is struggling. That seems to be true for everybody I talk to. And then worship is going surprisingly well. It's more meaningful than in-person worship to some people. And the music is also going well. And some churches are getting remote members, like from far away, new members.
Absolutely. Thank you, Karen. Really quickly, anyone else from room 1 that might want to add something that Karen might have forgotten or left out? If so, just unmute and jump in. As usual, Karen is right now. Tina.
I just have one thing to add. Sure. Just as far as where we're hurting, we have actually lost recently several long-term members, and where we're hurting is not by being able to be together for celebration of life. I mean, we've done things on Zoom, but it's been very different, and we're all sad about that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tina. And thank you, Karen. Room 2, that was the room that David was in. So if you were with David, did someone volunteer to represent that group? Did you guys appoint a person?
I think that was our group, Kristen.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Great. Thanks,
Let's see. So generally coping well, but staff, some of the best things have been people coming from farther away, and in some places, in some ways, people connecting more in classes, in my congregation, small groups, and in another congregation, some classes. Things have been able to happen collaboratively. In Dallas, they were able to collaborate with another congregation for classes, and my congregation has collaborated in the region with some events. But hurting, not seeing families of children and youth, that's a big one. Exhausted staff, and in my congregation's case, also a small number of volunteers who can do the tech support along with staff. So some exhausted specialized volunteers, hard to connect with new people, and Zoom fatigue. And I think I caught it all. If I didn't, pipe in.
Thank you, Kristen. Anyone from that group that wanted to add anything? We good? Great summary then, Kristen. Thank you. Room 3, that was the group where Betsy was one of the members. Robbie.
Since I'm the admin in the group, I offered to take notes, which is what I do all the time. So I have way too detailed notes, so I'll try to be brief. So a lot of worship was a highlight of the summaries that we got. Some minister fatigue for one of the congregations because the only one minister, and then they were able to get guest ministers and do collaborations with other congregations in the area, which was nice. And media tech people is a challenge. I know it was for us for a long time, and having the small number, not having a big pool within the congregation, hey, for enlisting volunteers. And I know that's with us also. And maybe extending hours of current staffers to do this or hire a tech person. The RE program suffering was a main theme around because of Zoom burnout, because of the children going to Zoom school, and getting volunteers for the program was difficult. Our church, I didn't get to talk because we just were sharing so wonderfully, but our RE program has really done well because we haven't done anything at Sunday at church time. We've offered one-on-one tutoring. We've offered other times during the week, like on Saturday morning and Sunday afternoon later, for the kids to have some special time with our RE person. So I think that's gone really well in our church. Caring ministry, really a heavy emphasis on caring ministry. I know at our church, when it first happened, we put together a telephone tree, and every member of our church has been called several times. And then we did care packages that people could drive through at Halloween and Christmas for holiday, and then delivered to the ones that are homebound, and that went over really well. Let's see. Some people expressed an interest in, when we get back to church, keeping the Zoom meeting going because of driving at night, just how wonderfully smaller covenant groups have been able to develop deeper relationships because they're just there with each other. And then another one kept the work parties going so people could still be together and do work outside on the church, like painting buildings, upgrading memorial gardens, new makeovers in certain areas, that kind of thing. I know our church, the one thing that we started right before the pandemic hit is a food pantry out of our South Bay campus, because we're a 2-campus church. And that has been the major thing that people have donated to, and 40 volunteers, regular volunteers. It's just been a wonderful outreach that we've been doing, and we got a award from the city of Chula Vista for that. So I think I've got pretty much everything. Does anybody have anything to add from my group?
If so, just unmute and jump in. Anything to add? Wow, great summaries, all 3. Karen Armstrong, is there anything on the chat of note?
No, I think we said it before. We just have the second question on there. If anybody needs to see that.
Okay, so we're going to go into a second breakout room, but before we do, I just want to give folks one more chance. Is there anything related to the first question that hasn't been discussed that you want to add to the conversation? Kelly.
This is more of a question comment. I've heard a lot of people say that due to Zoom that you're having a wider reach in terms of getting individuals to join your Zoom service. And I'll put my email in the chat, but I really am interested in how you're doing that. If you have a marketing committee, I don't know how you're reaching all these people, but I'm very interested in knowing more about that.
Great.
Yep. Thank you, Mark.
Yep. Okay, we want to get you into the second breakout room. If we hope that you can stay with us, but if you only committed for an hour, we understand. So we want to get you into the second breakout room before that happens. So I am going to first pause the recording, which I almost forgot. So welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a nice conversation. If any of you have to leave, it's 3 o'clock Eastern time. We certainly understand. I hope that you can hang in there for a little while longer. We will, and no later than 3:30 Eastern time. What the heck do you have to do that's more important, right, Sharon? So let's start with this time with room 3. And that Karen and Lori and Sherry were among the people in there. So person that volunteered to speak, if you could unmute and kind of give a quick summary of what you discussed.
Hi.
Diane.
Yes.
Thank you.
I took some notes here. So basically a few churches have a task force already in place that is looking at reopening. It was kind of the consensus of all of us in that group that none of us really have a timeline for reopening, anything real definite. I mean, I know my congregation has penciled in a timeline and what we're hoping it will be, but it's all very unknown right now. We just have to wait. I think we're still at a point in time where nothing can be determined for sure. So it's all going to be pretty wait and see.
Yeah.
Sherry from Duluth said that they have had groups able to meet in the church up to 12 people. So it sounds like they were the only ones that were really having anybody inside of the church outside of staff. I know none of the other churches were doing that, and I thought that seemed promising. So I'm hoping that that's where we're headed, at least to start.
Being also with Sherry from Duluth was kind of, I mentioned with our group, what's kind of interesting is we're at right now at a status that allows 12, but we haven't had any groups.
Oh, okay.
So, but you're right. We're at a level that allows it. We have had sales and that people spread out, but it's kind of interesting that nobody's taken advantage of that.
Yeah, that is interesting, David. We're finding the same thing in our congregation where there isn't a major rush to, well, people aren't allowed in the building yet, but even outdoors, there hasn't been a major rush of people that have wanted to congregate outdoors, at least not yet. Thank you, David. Diane, anything else?
I'm looking through my scribbles here. You know, a lot of us are trying to figure out a gradual reopening. It's not going to be an all or nothing kind of thing. I think that's mainly what everybody's going to be looking at as well. And as far as outside, just a note, I mean, we are planning on maybe our last service before our minister leaves for his summer break of doing that as a big, large outdoor service on our front lawn. So we'll see how that goes.
And Diane, what congregation?
West Shore UU in Rocky River, Ohio, Cleveland.
Absolutely. Thanks, Diane.
Oh, Diane.
Anybody else
Diane.
from room 3 that wanted to quickly add something that Diane may not have mentioned?
Yeah, I want to ask.
Betsy?
I want to
And then
ask
Lori.
Diane. Diane, what is your penciled in time that you think you'd like to return?
We're planning for in gathering in September. That's our ultimate goal. That we should.
September?
We're hoping that we can do that, because I mentioned in our group, our congregation is also kicking off our 75th Jubilee anniversary as well. So it's kind of a big deal, and we're hoping that we can do it.
Yeah. Thank you, Diane. Thanks, Betsy. Lori.
Yeah, I was in Diane's group. I was just going to say, somebody made the distinction that I noted, what's easy to bring back versus what's valuable to bring back. And I liked that distinction.
Yeah. Wow,
Thank you.
Great.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks, Lori. Thank you, Diane. Room 2 had Betsy and Reverend Peter and Tina, among others. So somebody volunteer. Robbie, geez, why am I not surprised, Robbie?
First thing I said, Robbie, will you take the notes? Okay. So anyway, so I didn't write down churches this time. I just wrote down bullet points. They all have people that are teams that are looking at reopening and how to do it, talking about how to, and one's going through a large development program, I think that Betsy said. So they can't meet until October, but they're going to figure out where else they might meet, like a temple or somewhere else in their town that people can meet if they wanted to start coming back. Really, most don't have a timeline, but are putting together sets of guidelines that have criteria based with levels of concern, which allow different degrees of coming together, which is fluid because some people are going up and down, and have been going up and down, and planning is still being done. There's protocols for small outdoor gatherings and small indoor gatherings, but haven't started the indoor ones. And the buzz phrase, no one can get back together until everyone can get back together. But now they're looking at that, now being asked to parse out that phrase. What does it mean? Children have not been vaccinated. So does that mean that we can't all get together till children have been vaccinated? So it needs to be more clearly articulated. So another committee started meeting this past week, and the focus was on how we get back to worship, talked about resources, all the different ways. They're doing really well online worship, and how do we spend our time, energy and resources on how to get back together. Want to offer a multi-platform worship, continue what they're doing, and then move into small groups, and then celebrating coming all back together sometime in the fall. Many policies to figure out. Level of concern with small groups that David just said, they have them, but nobody's doing it right now. And regarding inclusivity, they've never been able to have everyone come before the pandemic. Their people would be sick, they couldn't come to worship. So thinking about that too, and when you're thinking about inclusivity, whether you feel on a given day healthy enough to come. Starting with small groups over the summer, process and responsibilities regarding paperwork, tracing, contact tracing, that sort of thing. One congregation has a book where everyone signs in when they enter. I think whenever they enter the building. What about people who don't want to be vaccinated? How do we assess this? So that went around the room. Another congregation is not asking this question. So there's no honor system because we're not asking the question. How to gauge when to come back, do a congregational survey perhaps to get a read where folks are, but how surveys are sometimes. And then we went around, just did a popcorn, when do you think best guess coming back? And most of it was fall. And one congregation talked about it staff, and that was after Christmas, which was depressing. And Mark is shaking his head because I believe it was your congregation. For my congregation, we haven't even discussed a timeline. We've been meeting regularly, but we're going to concentrate on small outdoor groups now, but that begs a different, all the restrooms are indoors. So we have to come up with a policy or criteria about how to handle the restrooms. So that's where we are. And we have really good team that we put together. So.
Robbie, you are one heck of a note taker. That's a lot of stuff. Anybody else from room 2 that, in the unlikely chance that Robbie missed something, that wants to chime in? We good? Thank you, Robbie. So room 1, which had, among others, Connie and Sharon.
I took notes this time.
Thank you.
My pleasure. So most, if not all of us, are still very early in the planning stages or haven't come up with a concrete plan at all yet. But we've noticed that these conversations about how to reopen are popping up in various UU corners. And so it's the topic of conversation, and we're all trying to figure it out right now. Things to consider include tech needs. How can we come back? What technology do we need in order to make that a satisfactory transition? Evaluating activities that we can allow on our properties through the lens of our ministry priorities, because some folks are pushing to open sooner than might be in line with the congregation's greater interests. And so determining what those ministry priorities are in order to gauge when things can begin to open up. We talked about caring for the emotions and feelings and needs of different constituencies in the congregation. As folks in my congregation in particular, you know, some folks get vaccinated and then I said they think that everyone's been vaccinated, so we should just go back because I've gotten vaccinated, so everything's back to normal. And so trying to manage those different expectations. And several of us mentioned planning some outdoor activities as a gradual transition back to gathering in person before we can come back all together as a full congregation. None of us has a concrete timeline, but many of us expressed a hope to be able to come back to congregational worship in person for in-gathering. My congregation in January or February kind of randomly, maybe not randomly, put October as a hopeful place, but lots has changed since January and February. And someone mentioned President Biden's mentioning of the 4th of July as a time where we may be able to more actively transition towards in-person gatherings. And so the sense that I took away was that there isn't a concrete timeline, but everyone kind of has metrics or guidelines in place that will shift according to the conditions, the active conditions on the ground. Many of us have reopening teams or task forces that include input from medical and professional public health folks who are informing the boards. And so there are things in place for when the conditions merit a shift. Our administrator is actually offering assistance with congregants to schedule appointments for vaccinations if they need the assistance to do that. There was also some conversation around discomfort around asking people or requiring people to be vaccinated before we can come back in person, and whether that is an acceptable question to ask. And some wondering whether we ought to base these decisions on information on our surrounding populations as opposed to our particular individuals in our congregations. One other thing that I skipped over is that some of us mentioned either building a new building or remodeling an existing building. And so those building construction timelines will have to be considered in terms of when folks can reopen as well. So there's a lot of factors that go into this decision making, and it's kind of complex. And the sense that I got was that we're having those conversations now, and we'll probably have a clearer timeline sooner than we thought as the conditions improve.
Wow, that's a great summary, Adrian. Thank you so much. Anyone from that room one that Adrian might have not mentioned that you talked about or that occurred to you? Good. Okay. And I know there's some activity on the chat. Karen Armstrong, right? A question that Kelly asked.
Yes, and I'm still looking at that because I'm also taking notes, but I wonder if there's anybody who did not get a chance to speak in either or maybe even in both of their breakouts that might want that opportunity.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Karen, for providing that space. we have about 13 minutes left, and I want to move us now to the third question and just really open this up for anyone who would like to share. What has your congregation learned from this experience, or what have you learned personally in going through this extraordinary time in our history as UUs and as human beings? So I'm just going to open it up, and you can either raise your hand or just unmute and jump in, and I'll find you.
I think the one thing we learned, we had a digital presence was in our long-term strategic plan, and we were taking steps towards that. But the biggest thing we learned was the pandemic threw us into that, just kind of like jumping in the deep end. And so it advanced that a lot, more than we ever thought. Now we just have to figure out how to maintain where we are while we add in-person back. So the biggest thing we learned was how to do that, because we were forced to do it.
Yeah. Thank you, Sharon. Karen Hyams, would you go next? And then Diane, you're on deck.
Surely. So the congregation, I think, has learned something. They've learned that something that they've been saying about themselves is actually true. So people they just constantly, oh, our community is just so strong and we're so accepting. And, that is how they see themselves. And of course, I see the instances when they're not being that way, because that's what I'm looking for. But anyway, it turns out that what they were saying is true. They have hung together and stayed in their small groups and really supported each other. And when we did a survey about a month ago or 2 months ago, everybody said they were getting the kind of support that they felt that they needed from the church, that they were satisfied with their level of engagement, that worship was meaningful. Our feedback was so positive. And, it made me more of a believer in the strength of the community that people talk about all the time. And then for me, as a just professionally, we really got our online welcoming process much more tuned. And actually, I think we're going to keep using it in place of our old process. Like, people are filling out the visitor form before they show up to church for a service. We're just getting a lot more people saying, yeah, I want to come, and putting their hands up and telling us who they are. So I think, I learned a lot from that. Like, I think I'm actually an impediment to things sometimes because I'm talking to people rather than just letting them go do their own thing.
Thank you, Karen. Diane.
Yeah, I think what we've learned is that we're much more resilient than we probably ever thought we were. And we're also much more creative than we were. We really were put to task. And, to Karen's point, we've gotten really good feedback as well from our congregants. We've had 3 sessions, 3 times that we've done what we've called Operation Outreach. And we've done an entire church call. The last one that we did was right before the holidays, where we just checked in on everybody. And I know somebody else had mentioned that they were doing that. And we got a lot of really good feedback on that. So I think it's brought us together. We found that the same thing that Karen was saying, that the groups, or somebody else had mentioned, that our groups are really staying together as well. They're still meeting and they've gotten closer. So that's all been good.
That's great, Diane. Thank you. Robbie.
One thing I didn't get to share, we're a large church. We have 575 members, and worship is very meaningful for all of us. And we have 2 campuses, and our second campus works like a small church, but it's bilingual service. So we haven't missed a Sunday. March 6th, I think it was our first Sunday live stream. And we do trilingual services every Sunday, and it's been a real hard thing to do. And the tech person that we had at first, and we were live streaming, we had technical difficulties every week. They didn't seem to get better. Something different would happen every time. We bought new equipment, you know, all of that thing. So we've gotten better and better, but we went to recorded services, which has been a godsend. And they're really well, but we've lost people, I'm sorry and sad to say, from having trilingual service because of having Spanish spoken during the service and not wanting to sit there for that, probably. And we have either English spoken with Spanish translation or Spanish spoken sometimes with English translation, or the one that throws people off the most is speaking in English for the paragraph and then speaking in Spanish. Speaking English, speaking in Spanish. So we've tried lots of different ways, but it's really important to us being in a border town to Mexico. Really important. So trying to figure out how we're going to do that coming back, and losing people because of the technical difficulties and because of the many languages, I think. So we would have our average attendance. We had 2 services, well, 3 services with the South Bay, but two at our main campus. Our average attendance probably was 450 between the 3 of them. And now we have anywhere from 100 to 130 devices. So they say the multiplier is 1.7, still is way below. And we've talked to people who say we're not going to service. So that's kind of hurtful and sad. So just seeing what we're gonna do with that. And, you know, so I just wanted to talk about that.
I appreciate that, Robbie. We have a lot of work to do in many different ways. Anyone else that would like to respond to that question? Betsy?
Yeah. So I think as a congregation, we've learned that we are flexible and resilient. We've learned that to do a virtual service is harder to do than an in-person service, which to me, was counterintuitive, but I trust that that's true. It actually takes several villages to put our service together. And also that people not computer literate needed to be helped. And most of the people who weren't computer literate are getting on, and it's very satisfying to see them. A few have such a block against computers that they were not able to learn it and get on. And then I personally have experienced that we're a very vibrant, close, caring community. And I've also determined that I don't ever want to go to meetings in person again, especially at night. I mean team meetings, I don't mean the service. And I was surprised to hear our minister, Reverend Ben, say that he's had some trainings, encounters with, I forget the gentleman who is very well versed in virtual information, that they actually thought that more people would want to stay virtually than come in person. I don't know. I think more people would want to come in person just for the hugs myself. So I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah. Thank you, Betsy.
Mm-hmm.
I want to end by 3:30. And so unless someone else wants to share, and if you do, just jump right in. Otherwise, Karen Armstrong, your thoughts as we close?
I just think that there's so much value in doing this in community, and sharing the resources. Thank you for that, Mark, but also in just hearing each other process it. For what we're doing in our congregation, I have a lot of gratitude for everybody's sharing.
Great, thank you, Karen. I just want to say that as Reverend Peter and Marilyn from my congregation know, I'm not a particularly optimistic person by nature, probably because I'm a lifelong Mets fan. There, Reverend Peter, I said it. But I have a feeling that we're going to come back strong. I kind of agree with Betsy. I think that people are going to come back. There'll be a group of people that will want to stay virtual, and that's fine. But I think people are going to realize how much they missed hugging and being in community physically with other people. And I think across our country, we're going to see people coming back strong, and even more people coming back than we had before this all happened. And I think that hopefully that will be the silver lining. We'll see. We'll see. Thank you all very much for, Betsy, did you want to?
Just in closing, I just want to say, Mark, I really like this format. It worked quite well.
Good.
And also I enjoyed your sense of humor. So thank you.
Well, I wasn't trying to be funny, Betsy, but thank you for saying that anyway.
I was just wondering, where were the bad jokes? Where were the Mark Berman puns? I feel a little bit cheated.
I'm sorry, Karen. I'll email them to you.
Where's the corny slides?
I've matured, Karen. I've matured. Thank you, everybody, for spending this time with us. We'll send you. This will be recorded. It'll be on the websites, and I'll email you with some resources as well. So
thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Mark.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
Karen. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Peter.
Bye. Bye-bye.